Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 p.m. on Monday, the 11th. Yes, it is the 11th of January, so you know what it's time for. It's time for Litvak Leadership Live, and today my special guest is Michael Duke. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hi, good to see you, Sean. Thanks for having me on.
I am so excited to have you on. So Michael and I have, so here, let me throw up Michael's website before we even do anything. Michael and I have known each other for years and years. I would say it had to be back in the early 2000s. I first met you when I was interviewing with an organization in Louisville, and they wanted to run some kind of personality test on me that ended up coming back like every single personality test came back with the same answers. And that was when I first met Michael, and we've run into that was with Eagle Paper years ago, if you remember that.
Wow, that is a long time ago.
A long time ago. Michael and I have not necessarily run in the same circles, but we've run in circles that have overlapped. Michael's been a speaker at IFMA, the International Facility Management Association. We've talked about other business opportunities over the years. So I feel like I'm talking to someone who I know well enough to ask him hard questions. So today could be hard question day.
Wow. I can't wait.
Okay, so we're going to talk about how to motivate and manage people successfully, because you are the industry expert on that. But the first thing I want to know about, and I did not know this about you, when I read your bio on your website, it talked about how you had been in the ministry. When was that, and what did you do?
Yeah, when I was a young man, I went to Bible college. Okay. And I grew up and was very active in the Church of Christ. And so I graduated college. Actually, I had a Bible school was my freshman and sophomore year. Then I went to University of South Florida and got my bachelor's degree in business. And the leaders of the church that was my home church back in Kentucky, a month or two before I graduated from college, they said, we've decided we're spending a lot of money overseas. We're going to spend some money in Kentucky. If we found a small rural church that could not afford a preacher on their own, we'd be happy to supplement your salary. If we could do that, would you be interested? And I took some time and thought about it, prayed about it. And sure enough, I was a minister for the Paynes Depot Road Church of Christ in Georgetown, Kentucky for a little over a year. And then later went to Southern Indiana, Clarksville, and led a church there called the Marlow Drive Church of Christ for about a year and a half. And so for about 2.5, 3 years, I was full-time in ministry. And then for many years after that, I was, like a lay minister, where I would work during the week and then fill in and preach for churches on Sundays.
You were bivocational.
Yes, sir. That's the word.
That is the term, at least that I've heard. So
yeah, that works.
Okay. So, and then eventually you realized that was not your passion.
What you think sometimes ministry is going to be when it turns out to be not the same. It wasn't a crisis of faith. It was just kind of the fit for me and the ministry at that time. It's a much longer story than what we want to take time here. But it was a wonderful experience. Today, I'm still a book geek, and I love to prepare lessons, and I love to read, I love to learn. And if you're in ministry and you're preaching and teaching 3 to 5 times a week, that discipline is something that you have to learn. So I think when I'm 22 to 26 is when I really learned that discipline and carried it over in my career the last 30 years, 40 years now. Wow.
So I've heard Pastor John Carmichael, who my wife and I attended his church for a number of years in Clarksville, Indiana, Evangel North Church. And I've had him as a guest on the show. And I've heard him preach that there's many a businessman who should be a preacher, and there's many a preacher who should actually be businessmen. So it is finding the road that you're supposed to be in. So that there is a definite calling to that.
Yeah. For me, I think in my DNA, just who I am as a person, I think God just has wired me to want to engage with people for the purpose of making them better.
Sure.
And so, it was preaching and teaching, and then it was coaching and speaking and training, recruiting. So much of what I've done, that's been the common thread, is just try to make people a little bit better from after having engaged with them. Excellent.
So we are Litvak Leadership. So tell me, how do you define leadership?
I don't know if there's one definition. I think the broadest one that I like is, I think it's Covey's or Blanchard. I'm a big fan of both of those guys, but they just define leadership as influence. The word influence sounds crazy, but it's not even in the Bible, right? The word influence. Right. But the Latin means to flow into. And I think leaders, want to be the kind of people that flow into the lives of the people that work for them in positive ways. So I like that. Leadership is influence. And today it's become more important than ever to influence peers, right? You want to influence your peers as well as your subordinates. It's not enough anymore just to be effective downline. You've got to be effective peer level as well as upline.
Absolutely. So tell us about your first experience, not as a leader, but as a follower.
Wow. First experience as a follower. Well, I think one of the more early experiences that stick out is when I got my first sales position, and
right.
And the guy that hired me disappeared after he hired me, and it was a while before they put a manager in. So here I am, 4 or 5 years old, and I'm in sales. And I don't know if you've been in Louisville a long time, but I was selling nuts and bolts and keys and key machines to Levy Brothers and to general stores and little.
I worked for Hilti for 3.5 years. So I worked for Hilti, so I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. So much of leadership or being a subordinate is, in my opinion, I guess I'm wired as a leader, using assessment data. I've always kind of been wired that way, is just figuring it out on my own. So even as a follower, my way of following is tell me what the goal is, tell me how score is kept, and then kind of let me go do it. Right. I don't need a lot of direction. Just point me. Right. And then turn me loose. So that's how I serve best as a follower.
I get that completely. So on a Myers-Briggs, what are you?
Good question. I am not as familiar with the Myers-Briggs. On the disc, I'm a DI.
Okay.
And I'm just a straight line down, DISC.
Okay.
So yeah, you asked me one that I'm not as familiar with.
So I am, depending upon the role I'm in, if it is a sales role, I'm an ID, probably SC. When I find myself in an operational role, I'm a DICS. The I and the D swap and the S and the C swap, because there's a little bit of different skill set that needs to come forth. So you should take a Myers-Briggs. It would be interesting. I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, I've taken it. It's just been a long time, but I don't have a process bone in my body, just to give you an idea.
Okay.
So, anything detail oriented or process oriented does not exist within me.
That's great. So what's your passion?
My passion is I just enjoy people. But I enjoy interacting with smart people, people who are principled. I'm a very conservative person in many ways, and yet in the same breath, I'm extremely open-minded and flexible. As long as my peers and the people around me are smart and strong, I just love interacting with them. I'm going to learn something, and I hope they're going to learn something. But that's really what fuels my jets, is people, just being around smart people. And I'm blessed in that way that I get to do that every day, just every single day. Yeah.
So when you say you're conservative yet open-minded, so we're going to go on a little bunny trail here. It seems like today in society, it's difficult for people to have conversations when they're in opposing philosophical or political viewpoints. I was having a conversation with someone the other day about a specific industry. And as we were talking, the individual said to me, she goes, well, I don't know your politics. And I told her my politics. And she said to me, she goes, oh, you could become my first conservative friend. I don't know anyone who is conservative.
Yeah.
And I had to scratch my head for a moment. And we were on video, and I'm like, anyone? She said, anyone. I don't know anyone who's conservative. So how do you think we can fix that for people?
Yeah, so I'm going to quote again. Covey said, seek first to understand and then to be understood. I think, people say, don't talk about religion or politics. I love to talk about religion and politics because I'm not trying to persuade and convince. Tell me why you believe what you believe. I'm genuinely curious. If I talk to somebody who's got a belief, I don't care if it's atheist or completely secular, if they're intelligent and well thought out and they explain to me, I just find that to be fascinating. And so I walk away and say, oh, that makes sense as to why they've come to those conclusions. They may ask me, well, why do you believe in God? Or why do you believe in what you believe? And I'm happy to explain it. But what happens, I think, is people just feel like they have to be aggressive and demanding of others. And then that leads us down the path of judgmental and condemning. And to me, if I'm genuine in my faith, I can't be condemning and judgmental, right? I mean, I want to be kind. Why can't two adults have a fascinating discussion, debate, and respect each other and listen to each other and walk away friends? Why can't that happen? I don't understand.
Well, and frankly, when I talk to people that don't believe or think the way I do, it is an opportunity for me to solidify what I believe and what I think, and to have to defend it. And I think at least a lot of people don't want to defend their beliefs. Everyone should just believe it. Shouldn't we, as leaders, whether you're leaders in your family, leader in your business, leader in your church, synagogue, mosque, life, whatever, be able to defend our own positions?
Absolutely. And I think it's my opinion, anecdotally, that the people get frustrated, angry the quickest are the people who have a conviction but are unable to explain it. And because they can't explain it, they get flustered. But I agree. The world is just gone crazy here lately. I don't care what we disagree on. We should care enough about each other and respect each other enough to be curious. And again, as a coach, as a learner, I'm just wired to be curious about people. And the more different people are from me, the more I enjoy it. I mean, if I'm just going out with another me, that could get boring kind of quick, right?
Oh, yeah.
But if you have totally different political views or religious views, and we can do all that and exchange ideas with kindness and respect, to me, that's just fascinating time spent together.
And frankly, I think that is what leaders are able to do. People that just get frustrated like that, I just have to question their motivation at times, and whether they should even be in positions of leadership if they can't have an ear to hear.
Amen. Yeah. Well said.
So how do you balance the pursuit of knowledge and not ending up as the smartest person in the room?
You just listen a whole lot more than you talk. I mean, I think that's the key, and not that. So my definition of genius would be we're all geniuses, just in slivers of areas, right? There's certain things that everyone knows that more about than anyone else. And so if I'm with another human being, I'm assuming that they're way smarter than me in certain areas. And if I can mine that relationship through conversation and find out where that area is, we're going to have some fun for a while because they're going to teach me something. So, there's some things that I've studied a lot on and read a lot about. So maybe I know more than most folks in those areas, but I guarantee you, right? I mean, my wife's an educator and she's way smarter than me on, instructional design and how to teach and manage a classroom. And she taught science. And it's just amazing, right? All the things that she knows and how easy it is for her to communicate. I don't know any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think that's the mindset. It's curious, and then it's listening and being a learner, regardless of who's around. My dad never went to college a day in his life. One of the smartest people I know. Right? So if you engage with a person and you're assuming you're smarter, you're going to get proven wrong pretty often.
Oh, yeah. So how do you build, when you're supposed to be leading a team and you have to keep shifting from leader to then talking to your peers and then talking to your boss, and, you program yourself to be a certain way and to believe in your own ideas. How do you recommend that people are able to adjust properly to have an ear to hear, but yet lead with conviction?
Well, great question, Anna. I'm just going to give you some very top of.
I told you I was going to ask you hard things.
Yeah, that's a challenging one. My mind's going in 2 or 3 different directions. So I think if you're strong, it kind of depends, right? So we talked about how I like to be led. So my default thing would be kind of what I would like. So the conversation I would engage in is, okay, what are the boundaries? If I have a boss, someone in authority over me, talk to him. So what are you comfortable with? Because I'm comfortable just going, ripping and roaring. And are you going to be okay with that? Well, she might want check-ins and reports and data that wouldn't come easy or naturally from me, but out of respect for the person in authority, there's some things I'm going to have to do, to accommodate that leader. If I'm working with peers, one of the fascinating things, because I've been using assessment for 30 years, I'm trained in multiple, EQ and values and behavioral assessments, is great leaders learn to adjust and adapt based on the people around them. It's not hard if you're paying attention to pick on somebody who's really detail oriented and wants more data. And so, you give them what they need. Then you turn and somebody else on your team doesn't need a lot of data. And so you adjust with that person. The book Primal Leadership by Goleman really speaks to that extremely well. How we need to be flexible. And I can talk about that book for 30 minutes. But Sean, did I address your question at all? Did I even get close?
Yeah, I think so. It's that question could be an entire show.
Absolutely, yeah. The old style, say 1980s and before, is you tell your people, this is how I lead. Be ready for this, and you need to adapt to me. The new style is, how do you need me to lead to get the most out of you? So the leader adjusts to get the most out of the employee.
But shouldn't there be a balance that a leader, in my opinion at least, should not be bending to the will of every employee as to how to lead? There should be where the teammate, subordinate, whichever word you want to use, but there's the employee and there's the leader, the employee should be bending to a certain extent to the expectation and the will of the leader, and the leader should be recognizing what the employee needs.
Absolutely. I think where I would negotiate goals like a management by objectives kind of approach. Okay, what's the right goal for you this week, this month, this year? Negotiate those goals, talk about process and the how you're going to get to those goals, but then how I'm going to communicate with you and whatever I can do to be flexible. Some people need a lot of your attention, right? They need more from you, maybe because they're newer, they're more gregarious, they're more conversational. Some people are, just wired to just leave me alone, just check in. Are you good? Do you need anything? I think the style or the manner in which you deal with them, I want to be flexible, but I would not bend on the accountability and the standards of performance. Absolutely.
So what do you think is the most undervalued skill that really needs to be focused on and improved in individuals?
As a person or as a leader?
Either. I leave it to you how you wish to answer.
So again, anecdotally, and there's been some good books come out. In my world, in the training I do, it's all about having, I call it a coaching conversation, leading from a coaching mindset. And so the sports coach from, high school on up doesn't apologize to the player for holding them accountable, doesn't apologize to the player for teaching them what they need to do to be better. And yet I find in the business world, regardless of the industry, managers unwilling and unable to have just a basic performance-based conversation with their subordinates. They avoid it. And when they have it, they're deferential, they're unclear. And so much of the work I do in my training and workshops, I've got an online program we've launched, is all about helping leaders at all level lead with that mindset. And I call it, clarity in terms of expectations, and then compassion with a relationship that builds trust. So leaders need to be direct and plain spoken and clear and kind at the same time, so that their subordinate people know what the expectations are and know when they're missing it so that they can adjust. I see just a short extension of that. One of the things that frustrates me to no end is when employees get fired without any conversation about their poor performance ever being had.
Wow.
I see that all the time. Matter of fact, I've been called before and leaders say something like, yeah, I got to let this guy go. And I'll ask, if you had that conversation, is it going to be a surprise? Because that's one rule I live by. Termination should never be a surprise. Oh, no. I think he knows. I've had conversations. And then, of course, it was all indirect. It was all ambiguous. We need to be able to say, Sean, I love you, man. You're a great person. You fit our values, but your performance is not where it needs to be. I'm going to give you 90 days. And
it should be a performance improvement plan.
Yeah, we need to talk about what you need. If it's not enough, I'll give you everything I can. But if in 90 days you're not meeting standard, I'm going to have to let you go. That's pretty clear, isn't it?
I think that's very clear.
But people don't want to have that conversation, and they look at me like I'm a four-eyed monster when I say this is what that conversation looks like. They go, you really have that conversation just like that? I say, what other way is there to have it?
Well, and people are afraid of conflict and at the same time hurting other people's feelings.
Absolutely. The best book that's come out in the last few years is Radical Candor, Candor.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, Radical Candor. It's a great book. Lisa Scott wrote it. She was a Google director, and she had a horrible experience where she let a guy go, and he was hurt because he didn't see it coming. And then because she realized that, she was hurt, and she vowed for that never to happen again. So she set on this path of being radically candid with her employees so that it would never happen again, and ended up writing a book about it because people said this transparency is so awesome that more people need to talk about it.
So where do you go for inspirational leadership?
Wow. Just as a principled person, I think I'll speak broadly. Anyone who takes their faith seriously should be a better leader. If we are principled rather than situational, and generous rather than selfish, and I think all faiths in their essence teach that. As a Christian, my faith inspires me, I think, in many ways to be a better leader. Beyond that, Ken Blanchard has been one of my go-to mentors. I got to meet him. It's not like he would know me, but I did get to meet him in person.
Sure.
I've read most of Covey's work, and both those guys are very principle-centered in their writings and in their leadership education.
Well, now it's interesting because I have found them to be very structured. And you say that you are not necessarily structured.
Well, have you read Blanchard's work on servant leadership?
I have not.
Yeah. So there's some aspects of the work that's structured. There's some are more principle based.
Okay.
It was Blanchard that came out with the 4 quadrants, and he called it principle centered leadership. I think that's kind of one of his theories or methods of leadership. Quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right. So that, I believe that was Blanchard. And Covey, we'd have to have more conversation about how you see Covey as structured. I'll add another name that I would recommend all of his books is Patrick Lencioni. Really good stuff.
Now, him I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Oh, okay. I've read that.
Ideal Team Player.
Okay.
He's got a half a dozen books that are out.
So when conflict arises, what should leaders be listening for?
To me, if there's conflict between 2 people and you're listening for someone who's unhappy or upset or wants to gossip or point out the faults of another, I think that's leadership's role. Number one, not to engage in the gossip, not to listen to unfounded, complaints. What I like to do is, let's just say, Bob wants to come into me and complain about Matt. It's like, well, I'd say, whoa, Bob, before you come in to me, have you talked to Matt about this? No, I haven't. Well, I'll tell you what, you go talk to Matt, and if you can't fix it with Matt, then 3 of us will sit down and have a powwow. How's that sound? And so to me, it's all about personal responsibility and owning your stuff. If you're upset, handle it, right? If there's somebody you're upset with, go to them and talk to them, right? That's very principle centered. And I think if people in general, business people in particular, did that, there'd be a lot more harmony and cohesiveness amongst teams.
I think I once had a disagreement with a coworker over commissions, and we ended up going to the CEO with it. And he turned to me and he said, I know this guy, and I'm not going to say his name, can't quote the policy. Sean, what's the policy? And I quoted the policy on how it should be split. And he looked at the other guy and goes, so why are we having this conversation if we have a policy already? Get out of my office.
Yeah.
So and at that point, the other guy was like, well, okay, fine. I don't agree with the policy, but I'm not going to be able to change it. So, and if there is a framework in place, people need to understand it.
Yeah, you address it. You look at the data and say, here's the policy, here's the rule, here's whatever. In lieu of a policy, you just have a conversation. What's fair? What do we need to do to work this out the best way we possibly can? If there's 2 or 3 principled people who really want to work it out, it shouldn't take that long to work it out, right? Now, I've known of coaches that have gone in, say, a team where there's a lot of dysfunction, and you go in on like a 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and you do a little work with them. And if you're not making good progress, I've known of guys saying, listen, so if I'm the president and I am in charge, you're not going home till you fix this. So call your wives or your spouses, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, and tell them you're going to be late because no one's leaving this room until you guys work that out. You do that on a Friday late in the afternoon, you'd be surprised
how agreeable people become.
Absolutely. The approach is important, right?
Absolutely. So shockingly, we've gone 30 minutes, bim, bam, boom, so quick. And I try to, honor people by telling them that it will be 30 minutes. So around 30 minutes, we look to cut it off. So in these final couple minutes, as people have watched this now and will be coming back for the replay, because we get great play on replay, what words of encouragement do you want to give individuals as they continue to walk on their leadership journey?
Wow. To me, life's a conversation. In my video this morning on LinkedIn, I just said, as leaders, too often we assume or presume too much. If you need somebody on your team to do something, whether they're a peer or subordinate, just ask them for it. This is what I need you to do. Be kind, be clear. And my belief is most people would say, absolutely, happy to. Too often leaders are vague, overly general, ambiguous. If you think you're being clear, be even more clear in order to get your point across. But always be kind. There's never an excuse to be rude, disrespectful, unkind. I had a bad day. Well, shame on you. You get a grip before you have those conversations, because you say something in 30 seconds. You built 3 years of history to build trust, and in 30 seconds you destroy all of it. And that's why people leave your company. If somebody out there hears this video and says, well, why do I have a retention problem? Most likely it's because you're not a very good leader.
And on that note, go to michaelduke.com. Michael heads up the New School group, and he can talk to you about retention. He can talk to you about recruiting. He can train your team. If you've not had a one-on-one conversation with Michael Duke at some point, you need to. Let me tell you, Michael is always a wealth of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And every time I walk away from him, I may not do exactly what he suggests, but I'm always blessed by the conversation. So, Michael, thank you so much for being my guest today.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to see you, Sean.
It's great to see you too. Everyone else, have a wonderful day. Be blessed in all that you do, and we'll be back to it tomorrow. Bye now.
Bye-bye.